We are in 1 Corinthians. We didn't get quite through chapter 15 last week, but we will get through it this week and probably in a ways into 16. And then after that, I am not sure, being as I'm just kind of stepping in for Paul here for a while. I'm not sure exactly where we'll go after 1 Corinthians, but we'll figure something out that'll be interesting and enlightening. And so I think last week I left off around verse 55. Let's start in let's start in 53. For the perishable must clothe itself with the imperishable, and the mortal the immortal. When the perishable has been clothed with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality, then the saying that is written will come true: death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God, He gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Isn't that refreshing? We have the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. What did we talk about last week? How do we know what sin is? How do we know what sin is? The word from the law. It describes what sin is, doesn't it? So if we have that, then we are going to have to be convicted by it. We can't just ignore it. It's there for us to realize, okay, it says do this or don't do this, and we make a decision what we're going to do with that. We either follow what it says or we go our own way. If we go our own way, more than likely, we are going to feel the sting of death. But, as it said, thanks be to God, He gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Therefore, my brother, dear brothers, he's giving an endearment there. Stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. He says, stand firm. Now, when we started this book, when Paul started this, were the Corinthian church having a little difficulties? Having a lot, weren't they? You know, at the first part of the book, they were following different people. I'm of Apollos, I'm of Cephas. Halfway through the book, what were they having? Problems with sin in the church. Immorality. Before the Lord's Supper, we oftentimes, when we partake of the Lord's Supper, we read 1 Corinthians 11. But if we read before that, we see the problems that they were having, don't we? How they were corrupting the Lord's Supper. They had some problems. And that's the reason he wrote this letter to them, is that I want to correct you. I'm rebuking you out of love. But he said, I want to correct you. And here he's saying, he said, dear brothers, stand firm. So there were some there that were standing firm, right? There were some there that were holding to the truth. But there were some that were kind of drifting off in other areas. And he's addressing all of them. Stand firm in what is right, so that you don't get drugged down, drug away. I was reading, I can't remember when it was, but I was reading, and we've talked about this before, how God tests us. He doesn't tempt us, but He tests us. I think God puts things in the church, as we have throughout the New Testament, how Paul and all of these writers were sending letters to the churches because of problems that were within the church. It's the same thing today. I think God allows things to happen within the church to strengthen it, to basically put the fire to the gold to get rid of the dross. If we weren't tested in this congregation with something that was out there, would we really know where we stand with God? Would we really know if we weren't tested with something that came in that obviously this is wrong? What they had in 1 Corinthians 5, wasn't it? The immoral brother that took his father's wife? The son took his father's wife? How were they handling that? Oh, that's okay. That's okay, isn't it? If that happened here, would we handle it the same way? Well, that's okay. No. Would we have to have someone write a letter to us to tell us that that's wrong? I would hope not. I would hope that we would recognize it here. But there are many churches today, churches of Christ, that are being led astray by these things that are within the church that they're not recognizing. That they say, well, I guess that's okay. Maybe we can have a few instruments on Wednesday night, right? We can kind of let our hair down a little bit. Wouldn't that be okay? Well, why not?
Unauthorized work.
Exactly. But how does it get started? How did it get started in Corinth here? How did that immorality become acceptable? They had teachers that were teaching against it. They knew that it was wrong. But how did it get started? Complacency. I think it happens basically, they show up and they check the box and that's all they have to do, isn't it? How did the stuff start before the Lord's Supper, where they all just gathered together and eat, drink, and be merry attitude? How did that start? Well, we're coming together for the supper, aren't we? But they weren't observing it as the Lord's Supper.
It goes back to chapter 1, that division. They were divided.
Exactly.
So, hey, our group's here, so we'll do our thing, and your group will do your thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all based on their division.
Right. And how easy is it to get division started within a group of people? When you get more than two people together, are their opinions going to be the same? Nope. But when you get a bunch of people together and their opinions all count and they don't use this as the bottom line, this is what we're going to follow, how much division can start? It can start very easily. Or saying that, well, I interpret this way, and you interpret that way. Well, you're wrong, because I'm right. How easy can it start? And once a little bit starts, it's just like the examples that we were given. A little bit of leaven, leaveneth the whole lump. And then it becomes a problem. Have you ever taken just a little tiny bit of yeast, barely a pinch, and you put it in flour and water, and what happens? I mean, most recipes call for 2-3 tablespoons or teaspoons or whatever, I mean, you know it's there. But did you know that you can put flour and water on the counter and it will draw yeast from the air that's around us? That's how sourdough first started. It'll draw yeast from the air. It's all around us. Is sin all around us? It absolutely is. And if we allow a little bit to come in, what happens? It'll leaven the whole lump. I digress. Yes, Jill.
There's a question. On your translation, I don't know if it was on 53 or 54, it said clothed.
Clothed. Yes. When the perishable has been clothed with the imperishable, and the mortal with the immortality.
I think if you go over to Galatians, it talks about another point about baptism. For all of you who are baptized into Christ have clothed
Clothe
yourselves
yourselves.
with Christ.
Mhm.
So I think that's another, point
Right.
there.
Mhm.
I like that clothed. on your-
Well, and it's taking it on. It's like being baptized into Christ. How do we get into Christ? Through baptism. That's the only way that it tells us how to get into Christ. Only way that it tells us how to be clothed with Christ, isn't it? Is through baptism. We can't just randomly go and pick something out and say, I'm going to clothe myself with this. That goes back to the wedding feast. Where when you attended the wedding, they supplied the clothing for you, didn't they? You put on the wedding clothes. You didn't just come in whatever. That way you were part of the group. You were recognized as part of the wedding party. That was tradition. We don't do that today. I can't imagine clothing everybody in the wedding party in the same thing today, but that's what they did then. So that you were a part of that group. And it's the same thing that he's saying here, what Joe brought up in Galatians 5, is that we are clothed in him. We put him on. That's important. We have to put him on. We have to be in him.
That was chapter 3, actually.
Oh, was it 3?
Yeah. 3:27.
Oh, in Galatians?
Yeah.
Okay. I stand corrected, 3:27. Yes, I had the wrong page there. So starting in, any other questions on 15 there? We'll start in chapter 16. This first verse is one that we use quite often when we are giving.
Just one thing. please.
Yes.
In 58, I think it's 58. Notable to look how he ends it. It says, the work of the Lord, knowing that in the Lord your labors are not in vain.
Right.
John also mentions we could know. And if we're doing the right thing, we will know.
Mhm.
And our labors won't be in vain. That's an
Right.
important closing point to that chapter, that we will know
Mhm.
based on the Lord.
Right. And when we use our own natural human thinking, do we think sometimes it is in vain? Do we struggle with that sometimes? That, man, I'm doing all that I can to present the gospel. I've been talking to that neighbor for 15 years and it just isn't working. Do we get to the point where we think that this is all in vain? I mean, I'm not getting anywhere. I always remember the story that Bill Brachkoff, when he was here, that he gave. He went fishing with a guy on Sunday afternoons for over 20 years. And he presented the gospel every time he was with him, trying to teach him, to get him to understand. Over 20 years. And he had no results whatsoever. And then one day, that guy showed up at church. And he gave his life to the Lord. Now, after 5 years, 10 years, 15, would you think, he ain't getting it? I'm going to go on to somebody else. Andrew.
My grandfather had a childhood friend who became a Christian in his late 70s.
Mm-hmm.
They've been around each other their entire lives, pretty much.
Yep.
And in his late 70s, finally started
Yep.
and he did something.
And that's the thing. We shouldn't think that it's all in vain, because it's not. If we're doing the Lord's work, it will produce fruit. He tells us it will. But we can't give up on our part. If Bill would have given up one Sunday before, that guy may never have become a Christian. If your grandfather had not set the example before that guy, every time he was with him, he may not have accepted Christ in his 70s. What is our influence around people in the world right now? Do we get tired of being on our best behavior? Always being quick with an answer for how we believe? Do we sometimes get to the point where it's like, there's just nothing's happening? I mean, we can look at this congregation. Well, how come this congregation is not growing? We must not have the right guy preaching. Somebody must not be doing their job. If we are living our life as Christians out in this world, in this community, we're making a difference. We may not see it, but we're making a difference in people's lives. And it may not be when I'm still alive that someone was influenced by my example or by my words. I may be dead and gone. But next week, there may be somebody that comes in here and says, you know, I've been watching Dan for a long time, ever since he moved in, and he's different. And I want to know why. And that could happen next week. So we never know who is watching us or how God is going to enact what is going to happen here in this congregation. We can get discouraged sometimes when the numbers are down and we think, how can this be? But this is nothing new that wasn't happening at the time of Paul writing to the Corinthian church. They were having problems. We're going to have problems. Other churches are going to have problems. But we need to get through them, and as Dan pointed out, our labor is not in vain. And clarify, our labor in the Lord is not in vain. That's the key. It has to be in the Lord. Verse 1 of 16, now about the collection for God's people. Do what I told the Galatian churches to do. On the first day of every week, each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with his income, saving it up so that when I come, no collections will have to be made. Then when I arrive, I will give letters of introduction to the men you approve and send them with your gift to Jerusalem. If it seems advisable for me to go also, they will accompany me. We use that one a lot, don't we? When we give, a lot of times we use that one, that on the first day of the week, you know, we give. Who does it say should set aside? Did it say those that are affluent?
Saints.
Each of you. Each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with his income. I think a lot of people will think, well, that's for those that have extra money. That's for those that have a surplus. They're the ones that are to give. But it doesn't say that, does it? It says each one of you in keeping with his income. So if someone is making 6 figures a year or 2 figures a year, every one of them should give, shouldn't they? Now, does that mean the one that's making a whole lot gives the same amount as the one that's making less? Or if the one that's making less has to give as much as the other one? It says keeping with your income. Does it say how much of that? A lot of people say 10%, right? Where'd that come from? The Old Testament. That was when they gave, you know, and a lot of people say, well, yeah, 10% is the standard. Well, the problem is that if you went to the Old Testament and you looked at how much they had to give, it was way more than 10%. Way more. If you really went to that and followed it. It's in keeping with what you want to give. Now we remember the widow, and she put in 2 mites, 2 pennies, whatever it was. And we would, as some of them said there, what a pittance. That ain't much. But look who all the Pharisees and that, look at how much they give. Ooh. What did Jesus say about her? How much did she give? All. She gave everything she had. Do we do that? Now, maybe not monetarily, but do we give all? Think about your life. I wouldn't expect everybody to give their whole living as far as the money goes, but what about our life? And I think that's what he was referring to. Not so much the amount that she gave, but what was behind that amount. She gave her all, her attitude. Do we give our all, whether we give $20, $200, 20 cents? The kids give. Are they giving their all? Are we giving our all? Because if we're not giving our all, can we truly say we're Christians? Doesn't Jesus want all of us? He wants our all. He's not concerned with the monetary, the amount of money we're giving. He's not saying, well, he gave more, so I'm going to prefer him more. No. He wants this in here. He wants our all here. But too many times people will say, yeah, but I give so much. He's going to smile on me.
But there is a standard given there. As you prosper.
Exactly.
Or as you've been blessed monetarily.
Yep. And how many of us have not been blessed? Can anybody say, I have not been blessed? No. Now some people say, well, I don't have the money that they do. Does that mean you're not blessed? No. I was blessed to be able to get up this morning and take a breath. Every one of us is blessed to be here. And yet sometimes we say, well, I don't know how much, I wasn't blessed like they were, so I can't give. Well, that's not what God is wanting. He's wanting each one of us.
And if you give with the wrong heart, like Cain.
It doesn't make any difference how much you give, does it?
No matter what it is.
Yep. Doesn't make any, you could give $1 million in that plate, but if you gave it because you wanted to be seen, what good did it do? Didn't help you at all.
You just got your own reward.
That was it.
That was it.
But unfortunately, man has a tendency to reward people like that, don't they? They put them in a higher class. Because, they got, they look at them and say, wow, they're really blessed. And they put them in a higher class, and that's not what God does. Joe.
Because it goes back to 1 Corinthians 13 and 3. And if I give all my possessions to feed the poor, and if I surrender my body to be burned, and I have a lot of it profits me nothing.
Yep. And that's how we should be giving, isn't it? Every first day of the week when we give, we should be giving out of love for Christ. Not to be seen of men, not to show off. It's out of love for Christ. And no matter what, whether it's 20 cents that Gabe gives or 200 that somebody else gives, he's going to look at that. Did they give out of love? That's what's going to be important to them. Lyle, did you have something?
I was thinking if you like you're saying, like the Jews did, they lied to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And if you give money, but you give it out of love, God will bless you.
Yep.
But when you lie to yourself, you're lying to God.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, set aside a sum of money in keeping with his income, saving it up so that when I come, no collections will have to be made. What was happening at this time, at this very time in Jerusalem?
We were in bad shape.
Bad shape. Famine. Famine. It was tough times. People were not getting along very well financially, were they? That's why there was a collection, wasn't there? They were collecting it up, and they were going to send it to where? Jerusalem. That's where they were having some difficulties. That's why he told them, gather this up and have it there, so that when I come, you decide how you want to send it. Pick out some men. We're going to send it to Jerusalem. I'll give you a letter that says, okay, this money is for the saints in Jerusalem. If that's not going to work, I'll attend with them. I'll go with them. But it was made. Go ahead, Andrew.
In 2 Corinthians, Paul talks about this quite a bit more in chapter 8 and 9. And
Yep.
2 Corinthians, he goes into a little more detail. And it's a year later. They've been gathering that money up for a year. But kind of to a point you were making earlier, 2 Corinthians 8, 4 and 5, he's talking about those in Macedonia who were giving out of they were poor in
Yep.
Macedonia, but they were still giving more than what they could probably afford.
Yep.
He said, imploring us with much urgency that we would receive the gift and the fellowship of the ministering to the saints, and not only as we had hoped, but they first gave themselves to the Lord, and then to us
Yep.
by the will of God. But the point you were making earlier about Christ wants everything,
Mhm.
and he's not talking financially.
Right.
He wants a heart. He wants all of us.
And they had the idea, didn't they? Gave themselves first to the Lord. When we do that, isn't he going to bless us even more? But we get it turned around, don't we? We want to get the blessings and then we will go to the Lord. But that's not the way he's saying it here, is it? Dan?
Well, you see in Acts chapter 2, starting at, what's happened is after, at Pentecost, when
Mhm.
Peter was preaching and Simon was teaching, it says in 44, it says, and all who believed were gathered together and had all things in common. So
Yep.
God first. And then it says, and they were selling their possessions and belonging and distributing the proceeds to all had need. Because of what happened, is a lot of people stayed longer to learn about God.
Exactly.
They had to help support them. They opened up their homes and preached. They were giving all their needs, not just finance, but food
Right.
and themselves.
Mhm.
That's what we need to be doing better of.
Because when they came to Jerusalem, they were just planning a minimal trip, weren't they? They were just going to be there, do the duty, go back home. And then when this all happened, when Peter started preaching, 3,000 souls were saved in one day. That's when plans changed, didn't it? And then it's like, well, we weren't planning on this. We didn't bring enough food. We didn't bring enough money for, lodging or whatever. And that's when everything changed, wasn't it?
Everybody stepped up.
Everybody stepped up to the plate and said, we'll take care of it. We'll handle this for you. That's the way we should be. With that same attitude. Of course, Jill,
I think we need to look at it as a privilege.
absolutely. It is a privilege. It's a privilege for us to be here today sitting in these nice seats, out of the weather, out of the sun beating down on our less than covered heads here. I mean, it is a privilege, isn't it? Huey.
As a preacher friend of mine did a lesson on this one time. He said, you can't outgive God.
Cool.
And that stuck in my mind. And if you try to outgive God, you'll be blessed beyond measure.
Exactly.
It's always a blessing to give, but to give for God's purpose, for the church, for the gospel, is
Right.
the best thing anybody could ever give.
Yeah. And that is so true. We can never outgive God. He gave everything he had to start with, didn't he? He gave before we did. He gave of His Son, His one and only. Before we even recognized Him. So no, we cannot outgive Him. And I don't know if anybody's done it. I can't say that I have, but have we ever put Him to the test? Have we ever given everything? I mean, if we can't outgive God, then we're, as Hubie said, we'll be blessed beyond measure. Have we ever tried that?
But I think He also wants us to be responsible for what we have.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
giving everything, and where you're saying, okay, Lord, now feed me, that's putting Him to the test, and that's also wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess there's lots of ways you could look at it, because I remember when He sent out the disciples and He said, what? Take nothing with you? And what were they thinking? There ain't no way this is going to work. No way. No. But were they taken care of? They were taken care of, weren't they? Do we trust God enough to know that He will take care of us no matter what happens? No matter what.
And there's a difference between need and want.
Exactly. And we get those mixed up. We think that God is going to give us what we want. And that's not the case. He tells us as a promise that He will give us everything we need. That's a promise. But I don't have a new truck. I don't need it. But I don't have enough food for next month. I don't need food for next month. I need food for right now. Because what does it tell us? Do we have tomorrow? We don't have tomorrow. All we have is today. It's one of Paul's favorite deals. I think it's in Hebrews, isn't it? All we have is today. So we don't need to worry about tomorrow, do we? I did last night. I was worrying about today last night. Who's going to preach? Why should I have? See, that was all for nothing. Because Andrew already had it. Dan was prepared. But I fussed and stewed all night. And was a little cranky this morning, as Jill said. Because I was just, it was too flustered, you know, I can't. But that's the thing. He gives us everything we need that we need right now. Jill, then Lyle, then Tawny.
Well, he's, even in the Lord's Prayer, He says daily
Daily.
bread. Yeah,
Yep.
He says, you know.
Yeah.
be
Didn't say I'm giving you this for a week. Just giving you daily. When the children of Israel were gathering, what did they do? They gathered daily. What happened to the bread at the end of the day? Rotted. Every day except the day they were supposed to gather for the Sabbath. They gathered the day before, and what? Miraculously, that bread held over through the Sabbath, didn't it? Didn't do it on any other day. And He gave them daily exactly what they needed. Lyle and then Tawny.
I felt like this. The Lord, I felt like the Lord told me this. He says, you're going to get up the next day. You think you're going to get up the next day? I'm going to just call you up.
Yep. And He could. We can't be guaranteed that we will wake up tomorrow. We can't guarantee that we'll make it home tonight.
He says, no.
From whatever we do, we have only today. Tawny, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say too, with what you guys are saying is, you know, like, anyway, my brain's, what Libby said, sorry. Anyway, you know, just with our everyday daily needs and stuff, we try to push that. I'm kind of having an issue like with my great-grandson. I'm trying to find out what he needs and this and that and this and that, and I don't need to do that. I'm fretting over if Kelsey's going to have everything, 'cause that's my granddaughter, she's having a baby. you know, and so, and like you guys were just saying, you don't have to do that. We don't have to sit there. With you last night, you could have picked up the phone, called somebody, stress is over.
Absolutely.
But the devil makes us
Mhm.
think this is the most important thing, you've got to get it done, you have to stress.
Yep,
You know, and we do that all the time.
yep, we do. Janet?
It goes back to control. You were thinking last night, you were trying to control the situation.
Exactly.
And we do that so much in
Mhm.
our lives.
I wanted to control the situation so that I had a handle on it. And I just didn't leave it up to God. And that's what happens most of the time, is when we think we need to get control of this situation and we don't let God work. And if I would just let God work and said, you know what? There's others there that will pick up the slack if need be. I have enough right now. But yet, Satan, he gets in there and says, no, you really can't rely on him. You can't. Come on, they're human too. Just like me.
And sometimes they don't want you there.
Yeah. So I have run over a little bit here, so we will pick up next week in verse 5 of 16. And we might be able to get through a little more of chapter 16 there next week.